from the top. Hi, this is Growdy, otherwise known as Matthew. Really, that's the other way around, isn't it? It's like Matthew, also known as Growdy. Anyway, we can talk about that later. I have been told for many years now that I need to start a podcast, which, is funny because there was like this brief moment in time when I thought that I might go into radio. I did think that. It didn't happen. And I also was very romantic about the idea of college radio and maybe having like a, Christian Slater-esque pump up the volume radio experience. That didn't happen either. So here we are, many years later, and something like this is well, fuck, I'm doing it. I'm doing this now. Yeah. So people said you should do this. You should have a podcast. And so now apparently I do. What is this podcast about? I don't know yet. I think, I was trying to explain this to my wife recently, and I just said, I think it's just interesting people talking about interesting things. And she said that I would listen to that. So maybe that's it. It is. A lot of people think it should be more automotive focused, since that's what I do in my newsletter. But that so far isn't proving to be true, and that's okay. So we're going to talk about some automotive-ish things. There are some auto-adjacent things in the first few recordings, but it's not strictly automotive, and that's okay. What is interesting is that every conversation, unintentionally, not in any way planned, ends up talking about AI. We end up talking about AI, machine learning, in every one of my recordings so far. Also, it turns out that I really like to name drop Jeff Hinton, even though I don't know him. So I think that happens twice now the first 3 episodes. So maybe I need to track down Jeff Hinton and have him on podcast. Why didn't this happen sooner? I think that I was afraid. I didn't really want to do this. I really didn't want to put my voice, certainly not my face, we'll work on that later, out into the wild. And I did think, I was afraid that if I did this while I worked at Google, I would probably get fired, that I would probably say something. It was inevitable. I would say something and they would finally walk by my desk and tap me on the shoulder and say, yeah, so that thing you said in your podcast, you can't say that, so you're fired. And that's not a problem anymore. But I guess the exercise now is really to create content in a variety of different formats and get that published out into the wild. So that will include what is happening on the newsletter. So growdy.wtf right now, you can go to Growdy, GROWDY.WTF, and you can sign up for that newsletter now, which gets published every Sunday. And this podcast, which I don't know, what day of the week will it get published? I don't know. We'll figure that out. And maybe Monday, maybe Sunday. Well, we'll see. We'll see how that goes. And then I'm working on something with another friend, colleague, associate, whatever we're going to call him, that we haven't quite figured out yet, that might be more video-centric. So we'll see how that comes along and see if that gets out into the wild. Really just enough content that I could have my own, like all my links, like I was like an Insta model or a porn star. Wait a minute, are Insta models porn stars, or are porn stars Insta models? Is that one of the things that might have gotten me fired? If I had said that when I worked at Google, I don't know. People ops, reach out. Let me know. Let me know if that's a thing that might have gotten me fired. Doesn't matter now. That's it. I don't know what else. I'm sitting here in my office. I'm recording this with my dog behind me. She hasn't barked yet, so that means no corgis have walked by the house. She hates corgis. I don't know what it is about corgis that she hates so much. Oh, let me tell you about the first few episodes. So one of the other goalposts, I guess, I set for myself when I decided ever so tentatively that I was going to do this was I'm like, okay, I want this person as a guest. If they say yes, then I have a podcast. If I email them and they say yes and we do a recording, then this is a real podcast. So the first recording, the first interview is with Kara Swisher. And kind of testing that in the wild, I realized this wasn't a surprise to me either, that all of my marketing and all of my Google friends, they all know who Kara Swisher is. But most of my automotive friends do not. So we'll see how that goes. We'll see what anyone has to say about that. And then I call on my network of contacts for the next few recordings. The second recording is with a friend of mine, a woman who I went to university with and haven't seen in a long time. And she is now a professor at the University of Waterloo. And then the third recording is another friend, a kind of triple mutual friend of the, it occurred to me while I was recording the second podcast, I'm like, I should ask this other person. And that's my friend Megan. So is Amy. Amy works, Amy is a prof at University of Waterloo. Megan is the president of the World Wildlife Fund, not World Wildlife Federation, as I think I called it once in the recording, but still, so Amy Morrison, Megan Leslie, number 2, number 3, and then through yet another contact from university, I was introduced to Andrew Miller, who used to work at Sidewalk Labs. And so we'll talk in episode 4 a little bit about what happened. What happened at Sidewalk Labs? I didn't know. I didn't know. That is it. So this is really just introduction. This is easy listening introduction of the Change Optimist podcast. And that was another thing I really struggled with. What the fuck am I calling this podcast? And I knew, much like so many of my presentations from my days at Google, that I was going to talk about change optimism, right? The basic premise that if you come at change through the lens of optimism, you have a better chance of surviving it or dealing with it or reconciling with it, surviving it. So I was working for a while with Change Optimism is the working title. I call that out in a couple of the recordings. And then I realized just this past week, it's not exactly Change Optimism, it's the Change Optimist, that I am the Change Optimist. And that is the name of the podcast, the Change Optimist. So thank you for listening to my rambling for episode 1 so that I have an episode 1. And look forward to my other interviews, which are going to be a lot longer than this. Thank you. I forgot one thing. I forgot just to say that my music is provided by Dart Tapes. It's provided by my friend Dart Tapes.